In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where the line between life and death is measured in seconds, sometimes the quietest voice carries the most deadly precision. This is the true story of Captain Sarah Mitchell, an A-10 Thunderbolt pilot whose silence spoke louder than any war cry, and how one question from a desperate SEAL team leader would reveal the kind of warrior legends are made of. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain of Helmand Province as Captain Sarah Mitchell performed her pre-flight checks on the A-10 Thunderbolt II. The aircraft, nicknamed the Warthog for its ungainly appearance and brutal effectiveness, sat like a sleeping predator on the tarmac of Forward Operating Base Chapman. Sarah ran her hands along the aircraft's titanium armor plating, feeling the familiar reassurance of the machine that had become her second home over the past 18 months. At 28, Sarah had already earned a reputation among her squadron mates as Ghost, not for any supernatural abilities, but for her uncanny knack of appearing exactly where she was needed most, often without fanfare or advance notice. While other pilots might radio in with colorful commentary during missions, Sarah's communications were crisp, professional, and minimal. She let her actions speak louder than her words, a trait that had served her well in the male-dominated world of military aviation. The briefing that morning had been routine enough. Intelligence reports indicated increased Taliban activity in the Sangin Valley, approximately 40 miles northeast of their position. Coalition ground forces had been experiencing sporadic contact with enemy fighters, and air support was on standby should the situation escalate. Sarah's A-10, call sign Hawkeye 27, was part of a two-ship formation tasked with providing close air support if needed.
As she settled into the cockpit, Sarah's mind wandered briefly to the letter she had received from her younger brother Jake 3 days earlier.
He was finishing his senior year at Ohio State, worrying about final exams and job interviews.
The contrast between their worlds struck her as both profound and somehow comforting. While she was preparing to potentially rain death from above on enemy combatants, Jake was stressing about whether his marketing presentation would impress his professor. Both were important in their own contexts, but the weight of responsibility Sarah carried felt infinitely heavier. The radio crackled to life, interrupting her thoughts. Hawkeye 27, this is Tower. You're cleared for takeoff. Runway 27. Wind is light and variable. Towers, Hawkeye 27, cleared for takeoff. Sarah responded, her voice steady and professional as always. She advanced the throttles of the twin General Electric TF-34 engines, feeling the familiar surge of power as 30,000 pounds of aircraft began its roll down the concrete runway. The A-10 lifted off smoothly, and Sarah banked northeast toward the assigned patrol area. Her wingman, Captain Rick Viper Johnson, formed up on her right wing. Viper was everything Sarah wasn't when it came to personality, loud, gregarious, and never at a loss for words. But he was also a skilled pilot, and Sarah trusted him completely in combat situations. Beautiful day for hunting, Ghost. Viper's voice came through her headset. Weather's clear, visibility unlimited. Perfect conditions for some target practice. Stay focused, Viper, Sarah replied. Intelligence reports suggest we might actually find some customers today. As they cruised at 15,000 feet above the mountainous terrain, Sarah scanned the landscape below with the practiced eye of a predator. The Sangin Valley stretched out beneath them, a patchwork of brown and green that could conceal any number of threats. Villages dotted the landscape, their mud brick compounds virtually indistinguishable from the surrounding earth when viewed from altitude. 30 minutes into their patrol, the radio erupted with urgent transmissions. Any station! This is Reaper 26 declaring troops in contact. We are taking effective fire from multiple positions and request immediate close air support. Sarah's pulse quickened as she responded. Reaper 26. This is Hawkeye 27. We're a two-ship of A-10s approximately 5 minutes from your position. Send your coordinates and situation report. The voice that came back was tight with stress and barely controlled urgency. Hawkeye 27, Reaper 26. We are a 12-man SEAL team conducting a high-value target capture mission. We have successfully secured the target, but we are pinned down by approximately 30 to 40 enemy fighters in prepared positions. Our extract bird took small arms fire and had to abort. We need immediate suppression of enemy positions to allow movement to alternate extract location. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied the transition from routine patrol to active combat. She checked her weapon systems, the 30mm GAU. 8 Avenger cannon was loaded with a mix of armor-piercing, incendiary and high-explosive rounds, and she carried a full complement of AGM-65 Maverick missiles and Mark 8 2 general-purpose bombs. Reaper 26, what's your position relative to the enemy fighters? Sarah asked as she began descending toward the coordinates provided by the SEAL team leader. Hawkeye, We're in a compound approximately 200 meters southwest of the main enemy concentration. They've got us bracketed from positions in the tree line to our north and from a series of fighting positions dug into the hillside to our east. We've marked our position with an infrared strobe that should be visible on your targeting system. Sarah switched her targeting pod to infrared mode and quickly identified the strobing light that marked the SEAL team's location. The tactical situation became clear as she studied the terrain. The SEALs were indeed pinned down in a small compound, surrounded on two sides by enemy fighters who had the advantage of prepared positions and cover. "Viper, you got eyes on the friendlies?" Sarah asked her wingman. "Affirm, Ghost. I see the strobe." "This is going to be delicate work. The bad guys are pretty close to our people." Sarah was already calculating angles of attack and weapon selection when the SEAL team leader's voice came through the radio again, this time with an edge of desperation that chilled her to the bone. "Hawkeye 2-7, be advised we have wounded and our ammunition situation is becoming critical. We need fires on those positions immediately, but they're danger close to our location. I need to ask who can fire in these conditions." The question hung in the air for a moment. Close air support missions involving danger-close targets were among the most challenging and risky operations a pilot could undertake. The margin for error was virtually non-existent, and the consequences of a mistake could be catastrophic for friendly forces. Sarah keyed her radio without hesitation. "Reaper 2-6, Hawkeye 2-7 can fire." Her response was simple, direct, and carried with it the weight of absolute confidence. Those three words conveyed everything the SEAL team leader needed to know, that the pilot speaking to him had the skill, experience, and nerve necessary to deliver precise fires in an extremely dangerous situation. "Roger that, Hawkeye. We're going to trust you with our lives here. The nearest enemy position is approximately 150 meters from our location. Can you work with that?" Sarah was already lining up her attack run, calculating wind speed, aircraft attitude, and ammunition selection. The GAU A-10 cannon would be her weapon of choice for this engagement. Its accuracy and ability to deliver precise bursts of fire made it ideal for close support missions. "Affirm, Reaper. I'll be coming in from the south, attacking north along the tree line. Keep your heads down and be ready to move when I tell you." As Sarah rolled into her attack dive, she felt the familiar sense of tunnel vision that accompanied combat operations. The world outside her cockpit narrowed to a series of specific points: the target area, her weapon systems displays, the friendly position marked by the infrared strobe, and the rapidly approaching ground. At 2,000 feet above ground level, Sarah could clearly see muzzle flashes from enemy positions along the tree line. She centered her targeting reticle on the concentration of fire and squeezed the trigger. The GAU A-10 cannon roared to life, spitting out 70 rounds per second of 30 mm depleted uranium projectiles. The effect was immediate and devastating. Trees exploded into splinters as the high-explosive rounds detonated among the enemy positions. Sarah held the trigger for a 3-second burst, walking the line of fire along the tree line before pulling up and banking hard to the left. "Good hits, Hawkeye," the SEAL team leader reported. "You've silenced about half the positions along the north side. We still have effective fire coming from the hillside positions to the east." Sarah was already repositioning for her second attack run, this time targeting the fighting positions dug into the hillside. These would be more challenging targets, requiring her to attack from a different angle to avoid hitting the friendly position with ricochets or fragmentation. "Viper, I'm going to need you to suppress the remaining tree line positions while I work the hillside," Sarah transmitted to her wingman. "Copy that, Ghost. Rolling and hot." As Viper began his attack run on the tree line, Sarah lined up her approach on the hillside positions. The enemy fighters had chosen their location well. The reverse slope provided them with cover from direct fire, while still allowing them to engage the SEAL team's position. But their choice of position also created a vulnerability that Sarah was prepared to exploit. She approached from the east, flying parallel to the ridgeline, before rolling inverted and pulling through to attack the reverse slope positions. The maneuver was complex and demanding, requiring precise aircraft control, while simultaneously managing weapon systems and maintaining situational awareness of friendly positions. Sarah squeezed the trigger again, sending another burst of 30 mm rounds into the hillside positions. Dirt and debris erupted from the impact points as the high-explosive rounds detonated among the enemy fighting positions. "Outstanding, Hawkeye," the SEAL team leader's voice carried obvious relief. "Enemy fire has ceased from both positions. We are moving to the alternate extract location now." As she pulled up from her attack run, she spotted movement in a dry creek bed, approximately 500 meters north of the original enemy positions. Through her targeting pod, she could see a group of armed figures moving south toward the route the SEAL team would have to take to reach their extract location. Reaper 26, be advised you have approximately 8 to 10 enemy personnel moving south through the creek bed to your north. They appear to be attempting to intercept your route to the extract location. Copy that, Hawkeye. Can you service that target? Sarah was already calculating her next attack run. The enemy personnel in the creek bed were moving through relatively open ground, making them vulnerable to air attack but also more difficult to track as they spread out and sought cover. Affirm, Reaper. I'm going to use a Maverick missile on that target. Stand by. Sarah selected an AGM-65 Maverick missile and locked onto the center of the enemy formation in the creek bed. The infrared seeker head tracked the heat signatures of the enemy personnel as they moved through the dry riverbed. Hawkeye 27, missile away, Sarah announced as she launched the Maverick. The missile streaked toward its target, guided by its own infrared seeker. The explosion when it detonated was visible even from Sarah's altitude several miles away, sending up a column of smoke and debris from the creek bed. Reaper 26, this is Hawkeye. Target destroyed. Your route to extract should be clear. Hawkeye 27, Reaper 26. I don't know who you are up there, but you just saved our lives. We are moving to extract now. Thank you. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction at the SEAL team leader's words, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Just doing our job, Reaper. Glad we could help.
As she climbed back to patrol altitude, Sarah reflected on the engagement that had just concluded.
The entire action had lasted less than 20 minutes from initial contact to the final target engagement, but those 20 minutes had required every bit of skill, experience, and judgment she possessed.
The flight back to base was quiet, both pilots lost in their own thoughts about what they had just experienced. Combat operations always left Sarah with a complex mix of emotions: satisfaction at a job well done, relief that friendly forces had been successfully extracted, and a sobering awareness of the deadly serious nature of what they did for a living. As the runway at FOB Chapman came into view, Sarah began her descent and approach. The landing was routine, but as she taxied back to the parking area, she could see a crowd of ground crew and maintenance personnel waiting for her aircraft. Word of the successful close air support mission had apparently spread quickly through the base. After shutting down her engines and completing her post-flight checks, Sarah climbed down from the cockpit to find her squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Hammer Davidson, waiting for her. "Hell of a job out there today, Ghost," Hammer said, his weathered face showing both pride and concern. The SEAL team leader, already called to express his gratitude, said he'd never worked with a pilot who could put ordnance that close to friendly positions with that kind of precision. Sarah nodded, accepting the praise but remaining characteristically modest. "The situation demanded precision, sir. The SEALs were counting on us." "That's exactly the kind of attitude that makes the difference between life and death in this business," Hammer replied. "Get some chow and rest up. Intelligence is already working on the mission debrief, and I suspect we'll be hearing more about this operation." End quote. As Sarah walked toward the operations building, she felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling on her shoulders once again. Every successful mission was both a victory and a reminder of the stakes involved in what they did. 12 American warriors had gone home safe that day because she had been able to answer yes when asked if she could fire in extremely dangerous conditions. The mission debrief 3 hours later revealed details that made Sarah's successful engagement even more remarkable. The SEAL team had been conducting a high-value target capture operation, attempting to apprehend a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating improvised explosive device attacks throughout the province. The intelligence had been time-sensitive, requiring the team to insert during daylight hours rather than their preferred nighttime operations. Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Bull Rodriguez, the SEAL team leader whose desperate radio call had initiated the air support request, attended the debrief via secure video link from Kandahar Airfield, where his team had been evacuated for medical treatment of their wounded. Sarah found herself studying the weathered face of the man whose life she had helped save just hours earlier. "Captain Mitchell," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the same controlled intensity she remembered from their radio communications. "I've been doing this for 16 years, and I've worked with a lot of pilots. What you did today was exceptional. When I asked who could fire, I was hoping for someone with enough confidence to try. I got someone with the skill to succeed." Lieutenant Colonel Davidson nodded approvingly. "Master Chief, can you walk us through the tactical situation from your perspective?" Rodriguez pulled up a detailed satellite image of the engagement area on his laptop. "We inserted via helicopter at 0630 hours, approximately 2 kilometers south of the target compound. The approach was routine, and we had good intelligence on the target's location and the compound layout. The capture itself went smoothly. The high-value target was secured within 15 minutes of our arrival. Sarah leaned forward, interested in understanding how the situation had deteriorated so quickly. What changed, Master Chief? Local cell phone traffic spiked immediately after we took the target into custody, Rodriguez explained. Our communications intercept specialists picked up multiple calls reporting our presence to what we now know were Taliban fighters positioned throughout the valley. What should have been a 15-minute extract turned into a fighting withdrawal when approximately 40 enemy combatants began moving to surround our position. Post-mission analysis indicates this was a pre-planned response. The Taliban had established reaction forces at multiple locations throughout the valley, with the specific purpose of responding to coalition special operations activities. Rodriguez continued his narrative. We moved to our primary extract location, but the helicopter took small arms fire on approach and had to wave off. That left us with approximately 800 meters of open ground to cover to reach the alternate extract site, with enemy forces converging on our position from multiple directions. Sarah remembered the intensity of the radio calls, the barely controlled urgency in Rodriguez's voice as he described their situation. How close were the enemy positions to your location when you called for air support? The nearest confirmed enemy position was approximately 120 meters from our perimeter, Rodriguez replied. But we had indications of movement much closer than that. When I asked who could fire, I was asking for someone willing to put ordnance within what most pilots would consider an unacceptable margin for error. Lieutenant Colonel Davidson turned to Sarah. What was your assessment of the risk, Captain? Sarah considered her response carefully. Sir, the tactical situation clearly indicated that the risk of not engaging was greater than the risk of engagement. The SEAL team's position was becoming untenable, and they had wounded personnel who needed immediate medical attention. The weather conditions were optimal, visibility was unlimited, and I had positive identification of both friendly and enemy positions. Major Wells added another perspective. What's remarkable about Captain Mitchell's engagement is the precision she demonstrated under pressure. Post-strike battle damage assessment indicates that her 30 mm cannon fire achieved a 93% hit rate on intended targets, with zero collateral damage to the friendly position. The numbers surprised even Sarah. She had felt confident during the engagement, but the clinical precision of the post-mission analysis drove home just how narrow the margin for error had been. Rodriguez's voice carried obvious respect as he continued. The impact was immediate. Enemy fire ceased from the northern positions within seconds of Captain Mitchell's first gun run. The suppression of the hillside positions allowed us to begin movement toward the extract site, and the Maverick strike on the creek bed eliminated the threat to our withdrawal route.
Master Chief, how many of your team were wounded? Sarah asked, her voice carrying genuine concern.
2 casualties, both non-life-threatening, Rodriguez replied. Petty Officer Williams took shrapnel in his left leg, and Petty Officer Garcia sustained a concussion from an RPG near miss. Both men are expected to make full recoveries and return to duty within a few weeks. Sarah felt a wave of relief at hearing the casualties had not been serious. Close air support missions always carried the risk that friendly forces might be injured by ordnance delivered in support of their position, and the knowledge that the SEAL team had emerged with only minor injuries validated her decision to engage. Lieutenant Colonel Davidson stood and moved to the mission timeline displayed on the briefing room wall. Let's walk through the chronology of events and identify lessons learned. Captain Mitchell, take us through your decision-making process during the engagement. Sarah rose and joined him at the display. Sir, when Master Chief Rodriguez initially called for close air support, my primary concern was establishing positive identification of friendly and enemy positions. The infrared strobe provided clear marking of the SEAL team's location, and I was able to confirm enemy positions through observation of muzzle flashes and movement. She pointed to the satellite imagery showing the tree line where the first enemy positions had been located. The northern positions along the tree line provided the most immediate threat to the friendly position, so I prioritized those targets for my initial attack run. The 30 mm GAU-8 was the appropriate weapon choice because it allowed for precise placement of fires with minimal risk of fragmentation affecting the friendly position. Major Wells interjected. The gun camera footage shows Captain Mitchell's approach angle was calculated to ensure that any ricochets or fragments would be directed away from the SEAL team's position. Sarah nodded. The second set of targets on the hillside required a different approach angle. Those positions were providing enfilade fire against the SEAL team's planned withdrawal route, so neutralizing them was critical to allowing movement toward the extract site. Rodriguez's voice came through the speakers with obvious appreciation. Captain Mitchell, when you called out the enemy movement in the creek bed, you probably prevented casualties during our withdrawal. We had no visibility on those fighters from our position. Master Chief, that's why we're up there, Sarah replied simply. The altitude advantage allows us to see threats that ground forces can't detect. Lieutenant Colonel Davidson returned to his seat. Captain Mitchell, in your assessment, what factors contributed to the success of this mission? Sir, several factors were critical. First, excellent communication between air and ground elements. Master Chief Rodriguez provided clear, concise situation reports that allowed me to understand the tactical picture quickly. Second, optimal weather conditions provided unlimited visibility and minimal wind effects. Third, proper weapon selection for each target set maximized effectiveness while minimizing risk to friendly forces. What would you have done differently, if anything? Major Wells asked. Sarah paused, replaying the engagement in her mind. Ma'am, I would have requested additional reconnaissance assets if available. Having real-time intelligence on enemy movement throughout the valley would have allowed us to identify and engage threats before they became immediate dangers to the SEAL team. Rodriguez's voice carried understanding. Captain, we were operating with the assets available at the time. What you accomplished with what you had was remarkable. The debrief continued for another hour, covering every aspect of the engagement, from initial intelligence gathering through post-mission analysis. Sarah found herself impressed by the thoroughness of the process and the professionalism of everyone involved. The military's commitment to learning from every operation, successful or otherwise, was one of the things she respected most about her service. As the formal debrief concluded, Lieutenant Colonel Davidson asked Sarah to remain behind. Rodriguez's image on the video screen remained active as well. Captain Mitchell, Master Chief Rodriguez, Davidson began, this mission is going to receive attention at higher levels. The precision of the close air support, the successful extraction of the SEAL team, and the capture of the high-value target make this a textbook example of air-ground cooperation. Rodriguez leaned forward on his end of the video link. Sir, I'd like to request that Captain Mitchell be recognized for her actions today. What she did required exceptional skill and courage. Sarah felt uncomfortable with the praise. Master Chief, I was just doing my job. Any pilot in my squadron would have done the same thing. Captain, with all due respect, that's not true, Rodriguez replied firmly. I've worked with a lot of pilots, and very few would have been willing to engage targets that close to friendly positions. Fewer still would have been able to do it with the precision you demonstrated. Lieutenant Colonel Davidson nodded. Captain Mitchell, Master Chief Rodriguez has a point. What you accomplished today reflects the highest standards of military aviation. I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross. Sarah was stunned. The Distinguished Flying Cross was awarded for extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight, and it represented one of the highest honors a military aviator could receive. Sir, I appreciate the recommendation, but I don't feel what I did today was extraordinary. It was necessary.
Captain, that attitude is exactly why you deserve the recognition, Davidson replied.
You saw what needed to be done, you assessed the risks, and you executed flawlessly under pressure. That's the definition of extraordinary. Rodriguez's voice carried agreement. Captain Mitchell, from the ground perspective, what you did was nothing short of miraculous. You saved American lives today, and you did it with a level of skill that very few people possess. As the meeting concluded and the video link with Rodriguez was terminated, Sarah found herself alone with her commanding officer. Davidson studied her for a moment before speaking. Sarah, you've been unusually quiet today, even by your standards. How are you processing what happened? Sarah appreciated Davidson's direct approach in his use of her first name, which indicated this was a personal rather than official conversation. Sir, I keep thinking about how close we came to a catastrophic outcome. If the weather had been different, if my weapon systems had malfunctioned, if I had miscalculated the approach angle by even a few degrees, but none of those things happened, Davidson interrupted. You prepared for this mission through months of training and years of experience. When the situation demanded precision and courage, you delivered both. That's not luck, Sarah. That's skill. Sarah nodded, understanding the truth in his words but still feeling the weight of responsibility that came with such high-stakes operations. I suppose I'm just aware of how many things could have gone wrong. That awareness is what makes you a good pilot, Davidson replied. The best aviators are those who understand the risks and prepare accordingly. But they're also the ones who can act decisively when action is required. As Sarah left the briefing room, she reflected on the events of the day. 12 hours earlier, she had been conducting routine maintenance on her aircraft. Now she was being recommended for one of the military's highest decorations for valor. The transition felt surreal, but it also reinforced her understanding of why she had chosen to serve. That evening, Sarah sat in her small quarters writing a letter to her brother Jake. She wanted to share something about her day, but operational security prevented her from discussing the details of her mission. Instead, she found herself writing about the responsibility that came with being entrusted with such powerful capabilities. "Jake," she wrote, "today reminded me why I'm here. It's not about the aircraft, or the weapons, or the adrenaline of combat. It's about being there when people need help, and having the training and equipment necessary to make a difference. I can't tell you the details, but I can tell you that what we do here matters." As she sealed the letter, Sarah heard the familiar sound of A-10 engines starting up for the evening combat air patrol. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new opportunities to serve. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction, knowing that her skills and dedication had helped bring 12 American warriors home safely. 3 months after the engagement that would define her military career, Sarah found herself standing in the Pentagon's River Entrance Ceremonial Hall, wearing her dress blue uniform adorned with ribbons representing her years of service. The Distinguished Flying Cross ceremony had been scheduled to coincide with her rotation back to the United States, and the magnitude of the occasion was not lost on her. The past 12 weeks in Afghanistan had been a whirlwind of continued operations, training newer pilots in close air support techniques, and dealing with the unexpected attention her precision engagement had generated throughout the Air Force community. Word of the Danger Close mission had spread beyond her squadron, beyond her wing, and ultimately to the highest levels of military aviation leadership. Master Chief Rodriguez had flown in from Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters in Coronado, California, specifically to attend the ceremony. When Sarah saw him in person for the first time, she was struck by how closely his appearance matched the mental image she had formed during their brief but intense radio communications. He was shorter than she had expected, perhaps 5 feet 8 inches tall, but his presence filled the room. The confidence and competence she had heard in his voice was evident in his bearing and the way other service members naturally deferred to his experience and judgment. "Captain Mitchell," Rodriguez said as he approached her before the ceremony, "I wanted to thank you again, in person this time, for what you did that day. My team and I owe our lives to your skill and courage." Sarah felt the familiar discomfort that came with praise for what she considered simply doing her job. "Master Chief, any pilot in my position would have done the same thing. I was just fortunate to be in the right place at the right time." Rodriguez smiled, expression that transformed his weathered features. "Captain, I've been doing this for 18 years now, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that not every pilot would have taken that shot. The margin for error was virtually non-existent, and you knew it. The fact that you were willing to accept that risk to save American lives says everything about your character." Before Sarah could respond, Lieutenant General Patricia Morrison, commander of Air Combat Command, approached their group. Sarah had met the general briefly during her initial briefing about the ceremony, and she was impressed by Morrison's direct communication style and obvious technical competence. "Captain Mitchell, Master Chief Rodriguez," General Morrison said, "I wanted to speak with both of you before the ceremony begins. This engagement has become a case study throughout our close air support training programs. The precision demonstrated and the successful outcome under such challenging conditions represent exactly the kind of air-ground cooperation we strive to achieve." Rodriguez nodded respectfully. "General, from the ground perspective, Captain Mitchell's performance was flawless. The communication was clear, the response was immediate, and the execution was precise. Those are the 3 things that matter most in close air support operations." General Morrison turned her attention to Sarah. "Captain, I understand you've been working with our training command to develop new close air support scenarios based on your experience in Afghanistan." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied. "We're focusing on decision-making under pressure and the factors that contribute to successful precision engagement in danger-close situations. The goal is to prepare pilots for the kinds of high-stress, high-precision missions they're likely to encounter in combat." "What have you identified as the most critical training elements?" Morrison asked. Sarah had given considerable thought to this question during her remaining time in Afghanistan. "Ma'am, 3 areas seem most important. First, communication procedures between air and ground elements need to be standardized and rehearsed extensively. Clear, concise communication is essential when time is limited and stakes are high. Second, weapons employment training needs to emphasize precision over firepower. In danger-close situations, accuracy is infinitely more important than the size of the explosion. Third, Pilots need to develop the confidence to make rapid decisions based on incomplete information. Rodriguez added his perspective. General, if I may, ground forces also need better training on how to work with close air support assets. Understanding what information pilots need, how to mark friendly positions effectively, and how to communicate tactical situations clearly can make the difference between success and catastrophe. General Morrison made notes as both Sarah and Rodriguez spoke. These are exactly the kinds of insights we need to incorporate into our training programs. Captain Mitchell, I understand you'll be assigned to the weapons school at Nellis Air Force Base when you complete your current tour. Sarah felt a surge of excitement at the mention of the weapons school, widely considered the most prestigious assignment available to Air Force pilots. The school trained the service's most skilled aviators in advanced tactical employment of their aircraft, and graduates were expected to return to operational units as instructors and tactical experts. Yes, ma'am. I'm honored to have been selected for the program. The honor is ours, Captain, Morrison replied. We need pilots with your combination of technical skill and combat experience to train the next generation of close air support specialists. As the ceremony preparation continued, Sarah found herself reflecting on the path that had led her to this moment. Growing up in rural Ohio, she had never imagined herself as a military pilot, much less someone receiving one of the nation's highest awards for aerial achievement. Her interest in aviation had developed during college, initially as a way to challenge herself and prove that she could succeed in a traditionally male-dominated field. The Air Force had provided her with opportunities she never could have imagined as a civilian. The technical training was more comprehensive than any civilian flight program. The equipment was far more advanced than anything available in the civilian world, and the mission had a purpose that went beyond personal achievement or financial gain. But the path had also required sacrifices. Relationships had been difficult to maintain given the demands of military service and frequent deployments. Her social life was largely limited to fellow military personnel who understood the unique pressures and responsibilities of military aviation. The constant awareness that her actions could have life or death consequences for American forces on the ground created a level of stress that civilian pilots never experienced. The ceremony itself was impressive in its formality and military precision. General Morrison read the citation accompanying Sarah's Distinguished Flying Cross, detailing her actions during the engagement and emphasizing the skill and courage required to successfully complete such a challenging mission. Captain Sarah Mitchell distinguished herself by extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight as an A-10 pilot on the 15th of March 2024. On that date, Captain Mitchell provided close air support to a 12-man special operations team engaged in combat with a numerically superior enemy force. When ground forces requested immediate fires on enemy positions located within 150 meters of friendly forces, Captain Mitchell volunteered to engage despite the extreme risk to both aircraft and friendly personnel. Her precise employment of aircraft weapon systems neutralized multiple enemy positions while avoiding any casualties to friendly forces. The outstanding flying ability and courage displayed by Captain Mitchell reflect great credit upon herself and the United States Air Force. As General Morrison pinned the Distinguished Flying Cross to Sarah's uniform, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with humility. The decoration represented not just her individual achievement, but the collective effort of everyone who had contributed to the mission's success, from the ground crews who maintained her aircraft to the intelligence specialists who provided targeting information to Master Chief Rodriguez and his team, who had executed their part of the operation with equal skill and courage. After the ceremony, Sarah found herself surrounded by family members who had flown in for the occasion, fellow pilots from her squadron, and military officials who wanted to congratulate her on the achievement. But the conversation that meant the most to her was with her younger brother Jake, who had driven down from Ohio to attend. "Sarah, I have to admit I never really understood what you do until today," Jake said as they stood together in the Pentagon courtyard. "Listening to that citation and talking to Master Chief Rodriguez and the other people here, I'm starting to realize how dangerous and important your job really is." Sarah smiled at her brother's earnest attempt to understand her military service. "Jake, most of what we do is training and routine operations. Days like the one that earned me this medal are the exception, not the rule. But we train constantly so that we're prepared when those exceptional situations arise. Master Chief Rodriguez told me that you saved his team's lives," Jake continued. "He said that without your intervention, they probably wouldn't have made it out of that valley alive. That's pretty heavy stuff, Sarah."
It is, Sarah agreed.
"But it's also exactly why I chose to serve. When people need help, and when the skills and equipment I've been given can make the difference between life and death, that's when this job has real meaning." Jake nodded, his expression serious. "I'm proud of you, Sarah. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, and I'm proud of the person you've become. Mum and Dad would be proud too." The mention of their parents, who had died in a car accident 3 years earlier, brought a moment of sadness. Sarah knew that her mother and father would have been thrilled to see her receive such recognition, and their absence made the achievement somewhat bittersweet. They always supported my decision to join the Air Force, even when they didn't completely understand it, Sarah said. I think they'd be happy to know that the training and opportunities the military provided me enabled me to help save lives. As the reception continued, Sarah was approached by several younger pilots who wanted to learn from her experience. She found herself sharing lessons about preparation, decision-making under pressure, and the importance of maintaining situational awareness during combat operations. Lieutenant Amy Chen, a newly qualified A-10 pilot scheduled for her first deployment to Afghanistan in 6 months, asked Sarah what advice she would give to pilots preparing for combat operations. "Lieutenant, the most important thing is to take your training seriously," Sarah replied. "Every flight, every exercise, every classroom session is preparing you for situations you can't predict or imagine. The muscle memory you develop during training is what allows you to perform effectively when stress levels are high and time is limited." "What was it like making the decision to engage targets that close to friendly forces?" Chen asked. Sarah considered her response carefully. "It was scary, but it was also clear that not engaging would have been worse. The ground forces were depending on me, and I had the training and equipment necessary to help them. Sometimes the right decision isn't the safe decision." Another pilot asked about the technical aspects of the engagement, the weapons selection, approach angles, and communication procedures Sarah had employed. She found herself enjoying the opportunity to share practical knowledge that could help other pilots succeed in similar situations. "The key is preparation," Sarah explained. "Before you ever find yourself in a danger-close situation, you need to have thought through your options, practiced the techniques, and developed confidence in your ability to deliver precise fires. When the situation develops, there's no time to figure things out. You have to rely on your training and experience." As the afternoon progressed and the reception began to wind down, Master Chief Rodriguez approached Sarah one final time. "Captain Mitchell, I wanted to give you something," he said, pulling a small wooden plaque from his briefcase. "This is from my team. We had it made to commemorate what you did for us that day." The plaque was beautifully crafted, with an image of an A-10 aircraft etched into the wood above the inscription, "To Captain Sarah Mitchell, whose precision and courage brought us home. Reaper 26, the 15th of March, 2024. Sarah felt her eyes welling up with tears as she read the inscription. The simple gesture meant more to her than all the official recognition and formal ceremonies. "Master Chief, thank you. This means everything to me." "Captain, you earned it," Rodriguez replied simply. "What you did that day was special, and it won't be forgotten." As Sarah drove home that evening, she reflected on the day's events and what lay ahead. Her assignment to the weapons school would provide new challenges and opportunities to contribute to the Air Force's mission. She would be training the next generation of close air support specialists, passing on the lessons learned from her combat experience. But more than that, she knew that her story would become part of the larger narrative of American military aviation, an example of what could be accomplished when training, equipment, and human courage came together in service of a vital mission. The radio in her car was playing a country music song about small-town heroes, and Sarah found herself thinking about the people she had served, with the ground crews who worked tirelessly to keep aircraft mission ready, the intelligence specialists who provided crucial targeting information, the fellow pilots who flew dangerous missions with skill and dedication, and the ground forces like Master Chief Rodriguez's team who trusted their lives to the support provided by military aviators. Military service, Sarah realized, was ultimately about being part of something larger than oneself. The Distinguished Flying Cross pinned to her uniform represented not just her individual achievement, but the collective capability of the American military to protect and defend those who needed protection. As she pulled into her apartment complex, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Lieutenant Chen, the young pilot she had spoken with at the reception. "Captain Mitchell, thank you for the advice today. I hope I can serve with the same dedication and skill you've demonstrated. Looking forward to learning more from your example." The next generation of military aviators was ready to carry on the mission, trained and inspired by the examples set by those who had served before them. The cycle would continue, and America's commitment to protecting its service members and advancing its interests around the world would remain strong. That night, as Sarah carefully placed her Distinguished Flying Cross in the wooden box that held her other military decorations, she thought about the words Master Chief Rodriguez had spoken during the ceremony. "What you did was special, and it won't be forgotten." Sarah hoped he was right, not because she sought recognition or fame, but because she wanted the lessons learned from that engagement to help other pilots and ground forces succeed in future operations. Military service was about learning, adapting, and improving, always striving to better serve those who depended on military capabilities for their safety and security. The silent A-10 Aviator had found her voice, not in words, but in actions that spoke louder than any declaration of intent or statement of purpose. She had answered when asked who can fire, and in doing so had demonstrated the very best of American military aviation excellence, precision, courage, and an unwavering commitment to bringing fellow service members home safely. The SEAL leader asked, "Who can fire?" The silent A-10 Aviator stepped forward.